Disney keeps making live-action remakes of their animated classics. The trend isn't that new, but as it's rapidly accelerating, it might be interesting to find out what direction they're heading. It started in 2010 when the studio released Alice in Wonderland, and as that movie made over $1 billion, plenty more followed. You won't believe what kind of remakes will hit the big screen in the future, but more on that later on. Let's first find out why they're producing so many. First of all, it's partly just because the technology is now there. For example, trying to adapt The Jungle Book even a few years ago wouldn't have worked. Creating all the animals with CGI and making them look actually lifelike needs to be done properly. If they used real animals, the actor playing Mowgli probably would have been eaten. For the 2012 film Life of Pi, animators created groundbreaking new techniques and showed Disney that making realistic beasts is indeed possible. Of course, just having amazing visuals isn't enough to lure audiences into the theater. If there's one factor that's proven itself over and over again, then it's got to be nostalgia. And let's face it, the original animated films are as nostalgic as it gets. Kids these days might not be as familiar with them as their parents, but it's the adults who decide what film they're buying tickets to.
As a child, you love Disney, but as an adult, you still love Disney because it sort of connects you with that childlike feeling that everything is going to be okay and there's hope in the world, and it just sort of, for me, it just gives me this sense of like, everything's fine. Everything's fine.
Another reason Disney is doing so many live-action remakes is to expose a younger generation to their beloved classics. The stories and the characters are great, but might feel in some cases a bit outdated. And with the youth being accustomed to breathtaking special effects, it might be hard to impress them with decades-old cartoons. But once the next generation is also into the new and improved Disney flicks, the universe can be expanded with sequels, prequels, and spin-offs. Another recently updated film is Cinderella, directed by Kenneth Branagh.
This one, I think, was overdue for a re-evaluation where Cinderella is no longer a victim. That it was Disney, I think, was exciting. They were the ones who were really behind the idea that they wanted to find a way to get into the 21st century with characters like this that weren't meeting old-fashioned stereotypes that were very negative images for girls. And yet, we love the facts of the story. So how could we make both? And that was the challenge.
It should be clear by now that the new Disney films aren't just remakes, they're reimaginations. The plot is in most cases more or less the same, although they do tend to be a bit edgier and more violent than the originals. Also, there's now room for the directors to add some background on the characters, to make them even more three-dimensional, like they're doing with the upcoming live-action version of Beauty and the Beast.
When Belle is walking through that town in that first scene, how did she get there? And I'm not saying we added stuff before that, but as the movie progresses, you understand what it is that led her and her father there, and also what it is that makes her feel like such an outsider. And the same with the prince, not just, boy, he was nasty that one night, but what turned him into that man who deserved to be cursed.
Papa?
Belle, you must leave here. This castle is alive.
Who's there?
Do you wish to take your father's place?
Come into the light.
To summarize it all, making live action works. Besides the fact that Disney rakes in big bucks with them, they're also expanding their franchise and making sure they stay up to date. Not to mention that the majority of them are receiving decent ratings, so things seem to be heading up and up for the company. If you're a fan of their movies, then there's quite a few titles to look forward to. Future adaptations include Beauty and the Beast, Dumbo, The Sword in the Stone, Aladdin, Mulan, Winnie the Pooh, Peter Pan, Pinocchio, and Snow White. And that's not even counting all the various sequels and spin-offs.